Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. Gene Joke here, and today I'm ranking and reviewing the games from the Oliver Twins collection for the Evercade. Now this is a legacy cart, it's no longer in production and the second-hand prices have gotten a bit silly, and I will say off the bat it's not worth paying that for this collection, mostly because it's not worth paying that for any Evercade collection. If they're getting over sort of like 30 quid or whatever, they're definitely not worth paying that for. Obviously your mileage may vary, but yeah, I think unless you really want to complete a collection, there's no point paying over the odds for any Evercade carts. And, chances are, if you do look around, you'll be able to find legacy carts at sensible prices every so often. You just have to keep your eyes open if you're into that. Anyway, the cart itself. Now, personally, I have nostalgia for a number of these games, although not these versions. And I was very familiar with the Oliver Twins growing up. So that's basically how I'm going in. I think for, people in the United States and, further abroad, probably won't get much out of this collection. Although, it depends on your gaming taste and how much into discovery you are, or trying out, obscure or just things you never played before. But yeah, if you like your arcade collections and don't like the home micro ones, well, this probably won't be for you because these are ports of home micro games. Anyway, let's get into ranking the games themselves. So starting off with what is by far my least favourite game from the collection, and that is Professional BMX Simulator. It's a single screen top-down racing game where you race around on BMXs, going over the obstacles or dodging the obstacles, trying to beat your opponent. Instead of an accelerate, you have a pedal, and it's a rotation control, and it's very irritating. Very irritating. You get stuck on objects, you get knocked off, you go flying, and I had this as a kid on the Spectrum. I thought it was okay, but I wasn't a huge fan, and now I like it even less. It annoyed the hell out of me. I really don't like this game. Not for me. Nope, pass, can't stand it. And next up we have Panic Dizzy. Now this is an aftermarket game essentially. I believe it was worked on back in the day, but was finished off and released thanks to a Kickstarter in 2019. Now this isn't Dizzy Panic, which was released on the home micros. This is almost like a magical drop style puzzle game. You pull blocks down, you throw them back up in order to arrange them, and line them up and make them disappear. It's just not a very good one. I think every other version of this style of game on the Evercade is vastly superior. What you have to line up and the objectives just isn't really that intuitive. There are a few game modes and it makes it look like there's some value to it, but it's just not very fun to play. Again, really not a fan of this game. Moving on. And next we have Firehawk, which is the one game I've had no familiarity with at all coming into getting this collection. It's a top-down helicopter action rescue game. On the surface and first impressions are fairly positive. You take off from your aircraft carrier, you go and destroy enemy vehicles and emplacements, and you have to rescue hostages or people who are trying to escape, whatever. You're rescuing people. And when you do that, when you land over them, you lower down and you have to shoot the oncoming helicopters in like a different sort of side screen mode, which will be on screen around now. And yeah, it seems pretty good. The only problem is when you run out of ammo, you've got no way of getting more ammo. And if you haven't got ammo when you're rescuing people, you can't, and you die. And if you run out of ammo, you can't get more ammo because you get more ammo from destroying the buildings and things. And if they release like the ammo top ups, great. If they don't, you can get a bit boned and you basically have to die and start over. Although some of the damage is already done from your previous attempt. And yeah, there's the basis of a fairly good game here, but it just doesn't quite come together. Again, unless I'm missing something, but yeah, it's okay. It's just not fantastic or even particularly good. It's okay-ish. Once again, moving on, and this is where I think things do get better. Well, as long as you like the types of games, because we're getting into Treasure Island Dizzy, which is the second of the classic Dizzy games. I say second, it's the earliest one here because the first one was only released on the home micros, and that was Dizzy, a cartoon adventure. So Treasure Island Dizzy finds Dizzy, who is a face with boxing gloves and feet. He's not an egg apparently, but he looks like an egg to me, and he rolls around like an egg, but apparently he was designed just to be a face. But whatever. He's trapped on a treasure island and he has to, go about solving puzzles until he can escape. It's charming and it's got that very sort of fairy tale, sort of very childish like sort of vibe to it, which is what these games go for. They're obviously aimed for kids. They're quite charming and cute. And yeah, if you dig that, or you can, get on with that, that's great. If you can't, then maybe these aren't for you. The music is quite bouncy, gets a bit irritating after a while. The big irritations with this game is you only have one life, it's pretty much an instant death, and the inventory management is, well, you can hold 3 items. You pick something up, you pick up another item, you pick up another item, you go to pick up a third, you drop the first one you picked up, it cycles. And you need to use a snorkel to go underwater. And if you pick up items underwater and cycle through, so you drop the snorkel, you die. And there's just a few things like that, some instant deaths, some traps, and they get quite annoying. Underneath that though, there is quite a fun puzzle adventure. So with good use of save states and things like that, you can have some fun with it. But it is a very frustrating game and quite a tough game. Now, I played this on the Spectrum back in the day, and having played it and finished it on the Evercade, I realised that I was so close to the end on the Spectrum. So it can't be that hard. I nearly beat it as a kid, but yeah, it was a very frustrating playthrough just to do all this sort of stuff and die. And you had to kind of do things almost perfectly right. So yeah, a frustrating adventure, but it can be fun. But moving on to the next game, which in my opinion is Go Dizzy Go. This is another Dizzy spin-off. It's a single-screen maze collectathon, I suppose a little Pac-Man-like, although not very. You run around, you collect fruits, and if they're flashing and you get them in order of when they're flashing, you get a points bonus. Various items spawn to give you either points bonuses or power-ups. There's enemies running around who will kill you, and once you've got all the fruits on the level, you complete it and you go to the next level. Although every other level is a bonus level where Dizzy will continually move in one direction until he hits a wall. And these have a strict time limit. You have to get all the fruits before the time limit runs out. And I found these infinitely more engaging than the main levels. And if the game was just made up of those, I probably would have found it a bit more fun. The main levels themselves, they're okay. There's not a very strong puzzle element. There are pushable blocks, there's immovable blocks, and the items have various different effects, but it doesn't quite come together. And yeah, it's perfectly fine for a little while. You can have a play with it, you can have some fun with it, but there are better games of this kind on the Evercade. And yeah, once you've had a bit of a play with it, or maybe played through it once, it's not an overly long game, you probably won't come back to it again. And this is where some people's opinions may differ from my own. Next up we have Dreamworld Pogi. Now Pogi is a pet from the Dizzy games, or it's a thing that's in some of the Dizzy games, a pet that Dizzy has. He's a weird looking creature. It's a side-scrolling platform game, I suppose more traditional type platform game than the actual Dizzy games themselves, and it looks quite nice. It can be quite fun, but it just feels a little bit basic. It's fun, it's nothing special. I really don't have much to say about it really. It's fine. It's a game that was made back in the day and brought back in like in the 2000s, and I think was finished off in 2017 and released. So yeah, it's a curio. It's a fun little game, just nothing amazing. Although I say this, some people do seem to rate this as one of their favourite games, or if not their favourite game on the collection. And I suppose that depends on your patience for the Dizzy adventure games, which obviously I haven't put many of them yet, so obviously they're going to rank higher than this because I like them. I have nostalgia for them. So speaking of which, I suppose I should get onto one of them, shouldn't I? And yeah, next up is The Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy. Now this is the largest of the Dizzy games on the collection. I think it might be the largest Dizzy game ever made, I assume. Throughout the game you have to collect up to 250 stars, which are spread throughout the entire map of the game. You solve puzzles much like you do in Treasure Island Dizzy, although this time you have lives and energy. The game is much more labyrinthine, and finding a way around, well, it's not too bad. But there are annoyances at times, especially when you're trying to work out what to do, what item you need here and there, which is where the problems of the game start to arise and why it's ranked lower than the other games on this list, or the other Dizzy adventure games on this list. It is also possible to lock yourself out and solve a puzzle, drop an item somewhere, and then not be able to get back there to use when you need it later in the game. So it's a game that can lead to a lot of frustration. On the other hand, it does have a bit more variety than the other Disney games, with having some bonus games like minecarts and riding the rapids and things like that, and the magic and the sort of block puzzle games for getting extra lives. So there are positives to it, but for me, I just found it a bit too frustrating because of locking myself out and having to start over, and the length of it and navigating the world just got a bit tedious going back and forth, and ultimately the game just outstayed its welcome. I think for an adventure like this, without having whole new areas and locking other ones off or something, it just felt too big and too broad for its own good. A good adventure game, worth a playthrough, but I have no desire to ever play it again. Although maybe that will change in a few years, maybe. Now, for my nostalgia for this game, I did play it on the Sega Mega Drive back in the day. Yeah, can't say much more than that. I hadn't played this one, although some of the puzzles and things did seem quite familiar from the other games, but I think this might have been a bit of a remixed one because it came out after there had been several Dizzy games on the home micros. Overall, a big but slightly flawed adventure, but definitely a big improvement over Treasure Island Dizzy as a whole. And next up is Super Robin Hood. Now, I originally played this on the ZX Spectrum, or at least a version of this. I think it's an enhanced game. I don't remember it much. I played it a little bit on the Spectrum. I think it's one someone else had, or I had a tape that didn't end up getting chewed up or something. So I didn't play as much as I would like to have back then. But it's a fun adventure game. And this NES version obviously is graphically improved, I think, and slightly expanded as well. It's a fun adventure as you go and raid the Sheriff of Nottingham's castle and steal the treasures. It's sort of a puzzle adventure, not in the item management Dizzy way, more of a platformer, and where you pick up items or keys to unlock things and unlock other areas. And yeah, it's got quite a distinct control system. Your bow and arrow, essentially, you don't press and shoot instantly, you sort of hold it and knock your arrow and release it. So again, you can time your attacks on the enemies. And yeah, it's a good fun adventure. It's occasionally a little bit frustrating when you're working out what to do or how to do the next bit. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it, and it surprised me that my initial impression playing it on the Evercade, it wasn't that fantastic. I thought, maybe it's just nostalgia goggles, and I was enjoying it as a kid. But once I kind of got back into the feel of it again, I ended up really enjoying this one. But again, it won't be for everyone. So once again, this is a game that I know is many people's favourite on this collection. So, definitely worth the play. So next we have the last few Dizzy games, and these are pretty much on par with each other, to be perfectly honest. But next we have Wonderland Dizzy. Now these are all smaller than the Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy. They are essentially remakes of earlier Dizzy games. This one is a remake of Magic Land Dizzy, given a Alice in Wonderland theme vibe to it. You can switch between Dizzy and Daisy in this one. Well, you kind of switch when you get injured, which is why it ranks a bit lower. I found it a little bit irritating, although you can use it to your advantage. But other than that, it's a fairly standard Dizzy adventure. The inventory system here is much better than many of the other games, or the previously mentioned ones. And yeah, you solve puzzles in the classic Dizzy way. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a good, fun adventure. But I say that mechanic of switching between Daisy and Dizzy, I know, just sort of bugged me a little bit, or made it a bit less appealing. If they'd taken it out, it wouldn't have lost anything, and I would have felt a bit more streamlined and fluid in the gameplay as a whole. But again, it's a good fun adventure if you like the Dizzy games, which is a caveat that can be applied to the next few games as well, and any Dizzy game. So moving on, we go on to Mystery World Dizzy. I played back in the day as Fantasy World Dizzy on the ZX Spectrum. It was one of my favourites, or probably my favourite on the Spectrum, to be perfectly honest. And again, it's a really good version here. It's one that also was released, I believe, through Kickstarter, finished on the NES and released, or finished on the NES and released in more modern times, thanks to community-driven stuff and Kickstarter, what have you. It's a good version. It doesn't have some of the improvements to inventory that some of the other games do. But again, this one's a very fun adventure. Again, maybe it's nostalgia that puts it above the last one. And again, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a good, classic Dizzy adventure. And I think one that most people who played them back in the day will probably be familiar with, even if the name or the title of the game is a bit different. The puzzles are still very much the same, as far as I recall. And finally, the one that takes the top spot for me, although only by a small margin, is Dizzy the Adventurer. This is essentially Dizzy Prince of the Yoke Folk, and I did play this a little bit back in the day, but it was later on. I was moving on to other types of games and things, and I never finished it until getting it on the Evercade. It's very much a classic Dizzy game. It's got the benefits of improved inventory, the dialogue between characters is there, and yeah, this is just almost like to me it's the perfection of the Dizzy formula, if you like. It gets rid of some of the annoyances of the other games. It's not too long. It's almost like pure unadulterated Dizzy. And yeah, for me, this is the best on the collection because of that. Now, naturally, as I've said previously, if you're not a fan of this style of game, these aren't going to do anything for you, and this would be lower on your ranking, I suppose. And really, this collection, I might as well get onto the whole collection as a whole thing here. So, ranking the collection as a whole, because it is very Dizzy focused and the majority of the games are the Dizzy adventure games, your interest in it will live and die on whether you like games like this, your puzzle adventures. And they don't really have much replay value. Once you've played through them, you've played through them. Although some are short enough that, for a bit of nostalgia kick or just enjoyment of playing the games, you might go back to, you might not. There is a bit of variety, with your racing and your shooting and your Robin Hooding and what have you, and the puzzle games. So it is a varied collection with 11 games. It's not too bad overall. But as it's legacy and those scalper asking prices, no, it's not worth paying over the odds for. And if you don't have any nostalgia for it, probably not worth going to any great lengths to get hold of. But if, like me, you do have nostalgia for these games, even if it's not these versions, it's worth picking up. As a collection, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It does have the variety to a degree, and there are good games here. But again, it's with a caveat. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. For people with nostalgia, if you don't, it's probably going to be a 6 out of 10 at best. In my true usual fashion, I will finish up with a silly song based on one of the games. Well, it'll probably just be a Disney song. I haven't sorted anything out at the time of recording this, but it'll be playing any second now.
In a land of magic, where the stars shine bright, there's an egg named Dizzy, fearless and bright. With a heart of gold and a spirit so free, he embarks on adventures, you just wait and see. Oh, he's Dizzy, an egg on a quest. In a world of wonders, he'll give it his best. Through forests and castles, he'll brave every test. Oh, he's Dizzy, and never gets any rest. With friends by his side, like days is so fair, and the youthful crew, he's got friends everywhere. Solving puzzles and riddles, he'll never give up. In the enchanted world, he's the bravest egg cup. Oh, he's Dizzy, an egg on a quest. In a world of wonders, he'll give it his best. Through forests and castles, he'll brave every test. Oh, he's Dizzy, and never gets any rest. He'll roll through danger, he'll jump with glee. In the world of Dizzy, there's so much to see. He'll roll around until he's dizzy. Oh, he's Dizzy, an egg on a quest. In a world of wonders, he'll give it his best. Through forests and castles, he'll brave every test. Oh, he's Dizzy, and never gets any rest. Mess with Dizzy, he's cracking up. Mess with Dizzy, he's cracking up. Mess with Dizzy, he's cracking up.
I wonder what hatches out of the yolk folk.
Oh, he's Dizzy, an egg on a quest. In a world of wonders, he'll give it his best. Through forests and castles, he'll brave every test. Oh, he's Dizzy, and never gets any